Got it? Appearance of reality, the Kind's problem, free will determinism, a priori, a posteriori, and the three great theories of truth. And validity and truth, there's only one question on that. I'll just put that under the three great theories of truth. Most questions, there's 80 questions on a test. I bet you 35 of them are on appearance of reality. That's what we spend the most time with. And the question is, does appearance equal reality? What did Plato think? Does appearance equal reality? No, never. Why? Because reality are the forms. The forms outside the cave, right? What we're seeing is the back wall of the cave. That's the appearance. It's not the reality. Reality are the forms that are eternal and immutable. They never change, they last forever. Does Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas, and remember, we put Thomas Aquinas and Aristotle together, right? Does Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas believe that appearance equals reality? Yes, very good, that's right. Why? Why does appearance equal reality, especially with Thomas Aquinas? Because, well, God is not a deceiver. And God equipped us, He put us in this world, and He gave us our intellect in order to know the world that He placed us in. He's not a deceiver. He didn't create a world that we couldn't know. So, yeah, appearance equals reality. John Locke in the Corpuscular Philosophy, does appearance equal reality? If a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, did it really fall? Aristotle would answer that. How? Aristotle would say, if there's a tree in the forest and it falls and there's no one there to see it, did it make a noise? Aristotle would say, yes. Locke would say, if there's a tree in the forest and it falls and there was nobody in the forest, did it really fall? Yeah, it really fell. Did it make a noise? Very good. You got it. Yeah. Why? Because sound is a secondary quality. Sound only exists when there's an ear. Motion, yeah, doesn't matter. Locke will agree with Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas. Yeah, if there's nobody in the forest, the tree fell. Sure. But it didn't make a noise. Aristotle would say, sure, it made a noise. God's not a deceiver. The Corpuscular Philosophy says, no. When it falls in the forest, yeah, it moved. Why? Because motion is a primary quality. Remember the distinction between primary and secondary qualities? Yeah, go.
What does that stand in Berkeley?
Immaterialism. He's an immaterialist. He doesn't believe in the existence of matter. Primary qualities, right, are the qualities that make up the atom. The Corpuscular Philosophy is the precursor to atomic chemistry. And it says, what's really out there are these little tiny corpuscles. Later we call them atoms. And they're made up of shape, extension, solidity, motion, number, rest. And that's what's really out there. So did the tree really fall? Sure, motion. Atoms really moved. But it's the arrangement of those atoms and the motion of those atoms that produce all the secondary qualities. Color, sound, taste, what am I missing? Smell, right? All of the secondary qualities. There's a section on this where I just give you a list of things and you tell me secondary quality, primary quality, right? Berkeley, does Berkeley think appearance equals reality? Berkeley says, esse est percipi, existence is perception. Perception is the reality. The appearance is the reality. Well, how's that different from Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas? Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas says, here's us, we perceive the world, here's the world, and they pretty much match up. Berkeley says, here's the world, here's how we perceive the world, it's the same thing. There is no matter, right? God created perceptions, and that's what we're seeing, right? We're seeing the perceptions or the images that God created. So does appearance equal reality? Absolutely. Kant, does appearance equal reality? How would we know? We have no way of knowing. Kant thinks that here's us, and here's the world, the noumenon. And we never experience the noumenon. Because we have all these innate ideas. Anybody remember what the first two innate ideas were? What were the first two innate ideas that create what he calls the manifolds of experience? Right, very good. Time and space, right? There's no time and space out there within the world itself. Time and space is the way we organize our experiences. So this is the appearance, right? This is the way the world appears to us. It's the data of the world coming into us, and then we organizing that according to the ideas of time and space. Time is the way we organize our internal experience. Space is the way we organize our external experience, right? So does appearance equal reality? I don't know. We don't know what this looks like. Just like every animal creature, I guess it's true of plants too, but every animal senses the world differently. None of us, I know in the cartoons, Wile E. Coyote sees the same world that we do, but in reality they don't. They have different eyes, they have different ears, they have sonar, some of them. They perceive a completely different world. None of us are getting to the world itself. So what's that like? God knows. Only God has access to the noumenon. Human beings and all other creatures too are only perceiving the phenomenal world, the world as it appears to us. Yeah? The post-Kantian position, after Kant, what we realize is, Kant, you were right, but it's not just this innate hardware that God gave us, time, space, the 12 categories of the understanding, affirmation, negation, modality, all this kind of stuff. It's also all the concepts that our culture, history, and language community gave us. Black people and white people. There's no black people or white people out there. I told you about Luis Sanchez's master's thesis. And he showed it to me when he finished his master's at Columbia. And the first page, he said, his first day in college, he was in a philosophy class, and the professor said, there's no black people and white people out there. And he said, what's he, nuts? No, that's a concept that was invented 500 years ago. You got it at your mother's knee, and you were taught how to interpret things according to that concept. But that was invented 500 years ago. Moses had no way of knowing he was married to a black woman, you know?
So were you saying due to the slave trade that became very popular?
Why do you think it came about? Western Europeans are going into the non-white parts of the world and committing genocide. How do you justify that? You create this idea of race. And once you create the idea of race, you can, well, the Aborigines, they're not really human. The Native Americans aren't really human. They're uncivilized. They look a little bit like us, but they're really not like us, you know? That never existed prior to 500 years ago. They knew that people were culturally different. Moses knew that his wife, she was a sub-Saharan African. She was from Ethiopia. He knew that she was culturally different, but he didn't know she was racially different. And the old head of the Bible department used to say to me, he can say she was black. I know, but black didn't mean anything. It didn't signify a race. You had to create that concept. The concept of, Michel Foucault claims that the concept of homosexuality was invented in the 19th century. And Michel Foucault was a homosexual. He died of AIDS in the early 1990s. He was into sadomasochism, but he did a history of this. And he said it's not until the 19th century that they formed the concept that some people were exclusively attracted to members of the same sex. Prior, there was a lot of same-sex sex going on, but it was called the desires of the flesh or something like that, where some people were only attracted to members of this opposite sex, some opposite sex, same sex, bicycle sex, monkey sex, whatever. There was just no limit to it. But in the 19th century, they came up with this concept, and now, just like that guy that does the TED Talk talks about, you know, what is it, ADHD? I don't get my letters right. I know JFK and FBI and LSD, but I don't, what's the ADH? Is that it? ADHD. That was only invented, you know, before that you didn't know, or you didn't know you had a midlife crisis. I bought a canoe when I was 40, you know? Oh, that's a midlife crisis. Really? Nobody, my father didn't know that. You know why? They hadn't invented that concept yet. So we're conceptualizing the world according to culture, history, and language communities. So how do we know what? We don't. We only know the world as it appears to us, or as we've been taught to interpret it, right? Okay, so here's another way to go at it too, and then I'm going to start going through questions. There's a couple of questions about substance. A substance, says Aristotle, is that which is independent of all else. Remember when I did the thing about, I put on the board tree, Paris, father, blue, fast, green. Aristotle said when Bill Clinton got in trouble with Monica Lewinsky, one of the things he said was, well, it all depends upon what you mean by is, you know? And everybody made fun of him. What do you mean? Everybody knows what is. Well, Aristotle says there's 10 different definitions of is. When you say that something is, do you mean it's a place? What do you mean it's a quality or a quantity or a relationship? Father is a relationship. What do you mean it's a substance? And Aristotle thought what language was all about was substances, right? Substance has whatness, and it exists independent of all else. So, according to these philosophies, what does Plato think is really substantial? What does he think exists independent of all else? What does he think is really independent of all else? What's eternal and immutable and independent of all else? Because the shadows that we're seeing in this world are not independent of all else. They're shadows. They're produced by something else. They're produced by the forms. So the forms, the eidos, the ideas of the other world, right? That's the thing that's substantial. Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas, they think these things are substantial. Tables and chairs, rivers, lakes, whatever. The real world. And we perceive those real things in the real world. What would Locke and the corpuscular philosophy think is substantial, that exists independent of all else? The corpuscles, right? Matter, right? Matter. Matter is what's ultimately real. Berkeley's a little tricky. What do you think Berkeley thinks is substantial or independent of all else? What creates the percipes? What creates the perceptions? Say it. Well, images are the perceptions, but what creates them? Minds. Minds. God's mind, my mind. I don't know about your mind. I mean, you tell me you have a mind, and you can tell me you can do what I can do, perceive images and create images. But I don't have any evidence of that. I'm just going to take your word for it. But I got great evidence for God's images. I see God's images all around me. And I have my own images when I dream, or even now. There's the witch, she rolls down the hill, she hits the tree, the apple hits her in the head. So minds are what are independent of all else. I won't do it with Kant. But it gives you an idea of the different positions they take. What's ultimately real, right? So, the easiest part on the test, there's 80 questions, but there's going to be a section on this, a section on this, and a section on a priori, a posteriori. That's the easiest because once you're in that section, you know, okay, all these questions are about, you know. The toughest part is probably the matching section because it'll just give you a philosopher and then something about the different philosophers, and you got to match them up, and you don't know if that's from here or here or here, you know. So we'll start off by doing it the easy way and going to the actual section on appearance and reality. Answers. Thomas Aquinas, that's the same as Aristotle, that's common sense realism. You know, sometimes too, if you look around the test, you can find answers to tests in other questions, you know, so just be aware of that. Thomas Aquinas, John Locke, George Berkeley, Plato, Immanuel Kant. So it's these 5 guys, right? We're not going to post-Kant. Appearance and reality are only sometimes the same. Appearance and reality are only sometimes the same. Who would say appearance and reality are only sometimes the same? No? Very good. Locke, appearance and reality are only sometimes the same. When are they the same? Well, when you're talking about the corpuscles, when you're talking about primary qualities, yeah, appearance and reality are the same thing. The corpuscles have shape, and therefore that thing has shape, because it's made up of those corpuscles, or atoms, right? So, yeah, very good. How about this? If a tree falls in the forest, it does make a noise, even if there's no one there to hear it. If a tree falls in the forest, it does make a noise, even if there's no one there to hear it. No, what would I don't use that too much with Berkeley, because Berkeley would say, if you ask Berkeley, okay, a tree falls, there's no one in the forest. including God? Yeah, there's nobody in the forest. Then Berkeley would say, well, it didn't make a noise, it didn't fall, it didn't exist. God has to be perceiving it. Esse is percipi, right? But if a tree falls in the forest, it does make a noise even if there's no one there. Is that where I am? Yeah. Well, I missed the first question. Sorry about that. Appearance and reality are only sometimes the same. I did that. Yes. Good. Okay. And if a tree falls, I don't want to leave any out. If a tree falls in the forest, does it make a noise? It does make a noise even if there's no one there to hear it. Is? Aristotle. Very good. Thomas Aquinas, or well, in this case, Thomas Aquinas, right? Because I don't put Aristotle up there, but they're the same position. Okay. There is no difference between primary and secondary qualities. This would have to be someone who came historically after the primary-secondary distinction was historically made. Who's the one that would say there's no difference between primary and secondary qualities? And I even tell you, it's got to be somebody after this because there was no distinction between primary and secondary qualities before Locke, right? So, Berkeley goes, that's a lot of junk. That's why I told you when we were doing the lectures, if you were having real trouble with this, wait a second. When we get to Berkeley's going to say, you were right. Esse is percipi. There's just perceptions. I told you about his house and how his house looks like it's all wacky if you look at it from the road. But the road is a 20th century road. If you go back to the 18th century and you stand where the road used to approach the house, perfectly symmetrical. But it's symmetrical to the eye, not to mathematics, right? When you hang a picture, do you want to do it mathematically, or do you want to do it according to the eye? The eye, yeah? You say, but it's crooked. Yeah, the floor is crooked, so we gotta, now, oh, that looks good now. Anyway, the things of this world are not real because they are neither immutable nor eternal. The things of this world are not real because they are neither immutable, which means they change, they don't change, and they're not eternal. They don't last forever. So which is the guy? Plato, Aristotle, Locke, Berkeley, Kant. The things of this world are not real because they are neither immutable nor eternal. Come on, take a shot, somebody. No. Plato. The forms are eternal and immutable. See, if you get some of the things if you get what Plato's all about, he believes in these eternal, immutable forms. Once you see the words eternal and immutable, you go, oh, that's Plato. Yeah? Cool? Yeah. Anyway. Esse is percipi. Existence is perception. Berkeley, very good. A tree doesn't fall or even exist in the forest if no one, including God, is there to perceive it. That's Berkeley too. The tree outside my window is real or substantial, and that which exists independent of all else. Very good. Yes, Aristotle or Thomas Aquinas. Yeah. They're the ones that believe in substance, these things, right? Tables and chairs and trees. How about this? All we can ever know is the phenomenal world, or the world as it appears to us, rather than how things are in themselves. All we can ever know is the phenomenal world, or the world as it appears to us, rather than how things are in themselves. No, why wouldn't it be Kant? I'm sorry. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is Kant. Why wouldn't it be Berkeley? Yeah, the question is, all we can ever know is the phenomenal world, or the world as it appears to us, rather than how things are in themselves. Why wouldn't that be Berkeley? Because Berkeley thinks, this is the way things are. The way things appear, that's the way they are. But Kant thinks, no, the way things appear, that's not the noumena. That's not the thing itself. That's the world that's created by our hardware, our ideas of time and space and all the stuff, and especially with the post-Kantians, all the cultural stuff that we bring to our experience. I have this fantasy about I'd love to like have like a 2-year-old kid or 2-month-old kid and get inside their head and see what they see. What do they see? They just see stuff. They don't know any of it. They don't know what this is. They're just stuff. And they got to learn what the stuff is. And it comes mostly through language. Bug, you know? No, bug doesn't mean you hit the wall. They eventually figure it out. But they don't see the same world we do, right? How about this? If a tree falls in the forest, it doesn't make a noise if there's no one there to hear it. If a tree falls in the forest, it doesn't make a noise if there's no one there to hear it. No, very good, John Locke. Aristotle would say, no, it makes a noise. Why? Appearance and reality are the same thing. So if it made a noise, it doesn't matter. It fell, it made a noise, whether we're there or not. The appearance and reality are the same thing. Okay, that's the easy section. Yes, go.
What do you mean when you talk about time and space? What do you mean by space?
Oh, space is the way Kant says, space is the way we organize our external experiences. Space isn't out there, it's in our heads. Just like time, remember, time was the way we organize our internal, our memories. When I have an experience, I place it in memory, and I arrange my memories temporally. Like if somebody said to me, where do you live? You've lived at more than one place? I know. Yeah, well, I lived at this place first, and then I lived at this place, and then I lived, or, you know, did you date this woman or this woman first? I dated that one. If you don't know, if you just threw everything in there and didn't arrange it temporally, you know, how would you go home at the end of the day, you know? You go home and your mother's not there, so you go to the other place, you know? You have to organize your memory, your understanding according to temporal sequences. So time has to be an innate idea, says Kant. It's not something you could ever learn because it's the condition for all understanding. And space is the condition for external, right? I did a whole thing where I went through Descartes and then Leibniz, Newton, and then Leibniz, and then Kant on their ideas of space. But Kant says, Leibniz had said space is a relationship. It's not a thing. It's a relationship between pieces of matter. Well, Kant says the same thing, but the relationship isn't out there. The relationship's in here. You're in front of her. No, now you're to the right of her. No, now you're to the left of her, right? And the relationships change from my perspective because the idea of space is in my head and I'm using that to understand the external world. I don't just take sense data in, I arrange it spatially because of this innate hardware. That's the way our brains work, right? Now there could be other creatures that their brains don't work like that. And you know, what is it? Is it bats that have sonar? And they don't see things, well, what the hell would that be like? We have no way of imagining it, you know? Because we don't get to the real world. Right?
Wait, so,
Yes.
so when you say space is external?
No, space is internal, but it's our internal idea of the way we organize our external experiences.
Like physical things.
Yeah, exactly.
So like things like a desk?
Right, yeah, like that desk is in front of you and you're behind it, right? But you're to the left of somebody else. So it's the way we organize our external experience. Kant's trying to explain where did we get this idea of space from, right? Remember Hume traces back these ideas and he finds out they don't go. Ideas of cause and effect, ideas of matter, like Berkeley. You know, you have this idea of matter. Okay, these guys, Hume, Berkeley, and Locke, are all British empiricists. They believe that knowledge comes through experience. Okay, how do you know if something's true? Trace it back to an experience. Did you ever really experience that? I told you that story, right, about, I was a bartender for 11 years while I was going to school. And I'm out one night and I run into that other bartender. I told you the story. And he was with his wife. They got divorced shortly after that. And she was a real drunk, and she was half in a bag. And I'm talking to them, and I said, yeah, that's like that story you told me about when you were a kid growing up in Brooklyn. He goes, what story? I said, you know, the one about, you know, you were in that gang? And he goes, yeah. And then the guy paid you that money to follow that guy? And he goes, she looks at me, you never told me that. Oh, sure, you tell this jerk everything. You never tell me anything, you know? And they get this big fight. I figure, let me get out of here. I take off. I'm driving down the road a little bit later. When I was in the service, I was stationed at Francis D. Warren in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And I worked with a guy, Sergeant Moats. He was about Al's size. He grew up in Brooklyn. He was in a gang when he was a kid. He was the one that told me that story, you know? So I had this idea. I thought it was a true idea, but when I traced it back, it didn't go back to an experience. So where did it come from? The imagination, right? And what Hume said was there's a whole bunch of ideas like that. The idea of matter. Nobody's ever experienced matter. Where do you get that idea from? Well, I imagine there's got to be something that's producing this stuff. And Berkeley said, yeah, God, you know? You don't have to imagine matter, right? What Kant said was maybe things like cause and effect and matter and the idea of mind and all of the things that we can't trace back to an experience, maybe they're just part of the innate hardware God builds into our brain. So it's not something that we really know. It's something that allows us to know the world, right? It's the hardware that processes the software that's coming in through our experience. Do you get that? Yeah.
So, can you repeat the concept of the tree in the forest and the bear in the woods?
Oh, well, if there's a tree in the forest, it works with this guy. If there's a tree in the forest and it falls whether there's somebody there or not, and it makes a noise, right? But this guy, no. It fell, but it doesn't make a noise. Why? Because they believe in primary and secondary qualities. They think what's really out there in the world, and this is what everybody believes that is educated in America today, there are these atoms. Everything is made up of these atoms. And these atoms really do move, and they really do have extension. They really do have shape. So those are the things that are really out there. They have number, right? The whole idea of atomic chemistry says the only difference between hydrogen and gold is that a hydrogen atom has 1 electron and 1 proton, and gold has 76 electrons and 76 protons. But they're different kinds of no, they're all the same. It's just basic matter. And you get more of it, and you get gold rather than hydrogen. That's just, I don't have enough RAM for that. But you see how we buy into all this stuff? Well, yeah, of course, well, Danaher, you're just not smart enough to understand that. Yeah, I don't understand how just by changing the quantity of something, the quality goes from hydrogen to gold. I don't get that. Maybe that's why I was in the Crows reading.
So if the tree falls and if somebody is like the tree falls then that would be reality.
Oh, say that again?
Like if what Aristotle believes, like if a tree falls and like the whole I don't know what to say, but like how does it relate to the appearance?
Well, Aristotle doesn't believe in atoms and the corpuscular philosophy. He's not that kind of materialist. He thinks God's equipped us to see the world, and what happens in the world is what's really there, and he doesn't make a distinction between primary and secondary qualities. So seeing and falling and hearing are all the same to Aristotle. They're only different when you get to the corpuscular philosophy. They think that Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas would think all sensations are the same. The sensation of a smell, the sensation of something being round, they're just sensations, and they don't make that distinction. Once that distinction is made, and they try to explain the distinction, they come up with the corpuscular philosophy or atomic chemistry. And then they realize, oh my God, this will give us a mathematical physics. Remember? This will be a way to mathematize the world. And we can have a mathematical understanding of nature. And then there was the other problem of, okay, but how do you know that this is the way nature really is? And they just said, well, let's get rid of nature. It's just our conceptualization. It's just going to be our understanding of the world. We're the measure of all things. Let's eliminate God, and whatever we say goes. And that's the modern world that we live in. That's why I'm homo. Okay, so other questions? One questions. I hope that helped you a little bit. All you have to know is that these guys see this distinction between primary and secondary qualities. And because of it, they see the world completely differently. You know, the whole purpose of this course, and the reason why you're reading The Second Truth, is I'm trying to show you This is what philosophy isn't this esoteric thing. It's the way you conceptualize the world. You came into the world and you learned at your mother's knee, here's how the things work. And you believed that. You had to believe that for the sake of your psychological development and social well-being. But at a certain age, you start to get an education and you realize that's just based on the conventions and judgments of past generations. Maybe there's a better way to conceptualize things, right? And that's what this is all about. Here's the way Plato conceptualized it. Aristotle said, I got a better way to conceptualize it. The corpuscular philosophy says, I got a better way to conceptualize it. Berkeley says, no, here's the better way. And Kant, of course, in the post-Kantian position. There's a development to human history. I'm just applying for a visiting professorship at Yale and at Union in the city of Columbia. And what I say in the email, I'm just sending out an email on my website and my Vita. But what I'm saying is that in order to do theology, you have to understand the development of human consciousness. You have to see, it's very hard to get postmodern people, post-Kantian people, to believe in 17th century theology, theology that's based on this kind of stuff, because we know that's not the nature of human experience today. And in order to bring the gospel to the 21st century, you have to understand the nature of the human condition. Okay? And hopefully that's what this stuff is giving you. It's showing you that there's different ways to conceptualize the world. I have a friend, she always says to me, well, with real science, like this is not, this is not real science. But real science is not real science. It's based on these philosophies. The technician that's out there doing the science, he's just doing the experiments. But it's based on philosophies that were developed by Newton and Einstein and Aristotle, right? Ways to conceptualize the world. And that's what's so fantastic about this. That's what gives you this enormous freedom, yeah? You don't have to conceptualize the world the way you were taught at your mother's knee. Anyway, how about this? The philosopher who said that matter does not exist was George Berkeley, John Locke, Aristotle, Plato. The philosopher who said that matter did not exist. Berkeley, very good. How about this? The philosopher who believed that this is a good question. The philosopher who believed that material things existed but were less than ultimately real. Which guy believed that material things existed but they were less than ultimately real? Somebody take a shot. Plato, very good. Yeah. Material things exist. They're the shadows on the back of the cave wall, but they're not eternal and immutable. They're just shadows, right? The philosopher would say that if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there, it will not make a noise, but it did fall. Locke, very good. You got that? Everybody heard that? Good. Yeah. The philosopher would say that if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there, it will not make a noise, but it did fall. Falling, motion is a primary quality. Noise, sound is a secondary quality. So it fell. Why? Because it was a primary quality. It didn't make a noise. That's Locke. The philosopher who said that the desk at which you're sitting is not the real desk, but only the shadow of the real desk was? No, close though. Plato, the cave. Just when you think of Plato, think of the cave. And, here's the appearance, the back of the cave wall, and the reality is outside the cave. It's those things that are creating the shadows. Augustine says these are the ideas within the mind of God. That's what's ultimately real. Right? And this is a tough question. Which statement is most true concerning secondary qualities, right? Which statement is most true concerning secondary qualities? Like, how would you describe, if somebody said to you, well, what's a secondary quality? Would you say secondary qualities exist in us and not in the object? B, secondary qualities exist as such in the object as well as in us? C, secondary qualities exist not as such within the object, but as powers able to create certain sensations within us. And then D is just all of the above. It's C. Why isn't it A? A sounds pretty good. Secondary qualities exist in us and not in the object. Yeah, but they've got to be linked to the object somehow. Otherwise, they're just concepts within us. How do they exist in the object? They exist as powers, right? There's the molecular, and this is what's really weird about atomic chemistry and the corpuscular philosophy. The molecules that make up this desk have the power to produce the sensation of this color within me because of their arrangement, right? The other elder in my church was a pigment chemist, and he would say, you know, what different colors are is we just change the molecular structure, and that's how you get red or green or all of these different things. So there's something in that object that has the power to produce those sensations within us.
What was he about secondary qualities?
Secondary qualities exist not as such. There's no blueness in that table, right? But it has the power to produce blueness within me, right? Because of the arrangement and the motion of those molecules, right? Secondary qualities exist not as such within the object, but as powers able to create certain sensations within us. How about this? The philosopher who believed that there was a distinction between primary and secondary qualities. Wow, that should be real easy. Pardon?
You said was or
Was. The philosopher who believed that there was a distinction between primary and secondary qualities was John Locke, right? When Berkeley says, this is another tough question. When Berkeley says that matter does not exist, what he means is that A, what we see or experience in front of us really isn't there. I remember a visiting pastor came to the church one time and he said, yeah, you go to college and they tell you the door really isn't there. And well, that's not what they're telling you. And I was trying to explain to him Berkeley's position. And he goes, well, what if I came up to you and punched you in the face? What would that be? It would be the sensation of getting punched in the face. They're real sensations, but there's no more to it than the sensations, right? So when Berkeley says that matter does not exist, what he means is that A, don't write down the letters too because I'm jumbling up the letters. Don't go, okay, B. I got to remember B for that one, What he means is that A, what we see or experience in front of us really isn't there. B, the world of our experience is not ultimately real. D, or C, matter does not individuate members of the species the way Aristotle had believed. Or D, there is no independent thing apart from God that creates sensations or perceptions. There is no independent thing apart from God that creates sensations or perceptions. Yeah, that's what he means by matter. What matter is the thing that we think creates perceptions. And Berkeley said matter doesn't exist. What do you mean? I mean, there is no independent thing apart from God that creates sensations. God creates the sensate world, the world that we experience, not matter. All right? True or false? Aristotle would say that if a tree falls in a forest, it makes a noise regardless if anyone is there or not to hear it.
True.
True. I'll do the matching section last. That's the most difficult, I think. How about this? Which of the following were idealists? Anybody know which guys up here? You know what an idealist is? An idealist is somebody who believes that the basic stuff of the universe are ideas, right? Who are the idealists up here? No, Aristotle believes that he's a realist. He thinks these things are real, and ideas come out of that. Idealists are people who believe, no, this stuff. Berkeley, or there's another idealist too. Plato, very good. Plato and Berkeley. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you one of those in there. There won't be both of them, but those are the two idealists. So if I said which of the following are idealists, it's you pick out either Plato or Berkeley. Right? Berkeley, immaterialism, would claim that warmth comes from the sun, primary qualities, our own mind, God. Berkeley, immaterialism, would claim that warmth comes from the sun, primary qualities, our own mind, or God. God. The sun is just a sign that warmth is coming. For Berkeley, there are no secondary qualities and no secondary causes. There's, other than we have control over our limbs, But in the natural world, God is the cause behind everything. There's no secondary. Remember I gave you that thing about the witch rolls down the hill and she hits I'm having this dream, and she goes down the hill and she hits the apple tree and the apple falls off and hits her in the head. What caused the apple to hit her in the head? And you say, she hit the tree. No, I did that. That's my dream. I'm causing that. There's no natural laws at operation in my dreams. It's just my dreams. It's my unconscious that's creating that, or my will, whatever. In Plato's cave allegory, who's the person who comes back into the cave to tell the cave dwellers that what they were seeing were just shadows? Very good, Socrates. Who got that?
Raheem.
Wow, very good, very good. I didn't have to give you the answers. That's very good. A common sense realist like Thomas Aquinas would say that appearance equals reality because, anybody want to take a guess before I even get to it? Why does Thomas Aquinas or Aristotle, mostly Thomas Aquinas, say that appearance equals reality? Something about God. God is not, he's not a deceiver. God equipped us to know the world that's really there. Now the terrible thing about that, if you're still a Thomas today, if you're still a common sense realist, that means that there really are black people and white people out there. Why? Because I see, hey, God equipped me and I can tell. And it confirms all your prejudices, instead of destroying your prejudices. Yeah. A common sense realist like Thomas Aquinas would say that appearance equals reality because, and the options are all we can ever know is reality, B, all we can ever know is appearance, a passive intellect assures us of that appearance is reality, or God is not a deceiver. And God is not a deceiver is the answer. Okay, here's another section, primary and secondary qualities. 5 or 6 questions. The shape of a rose, primary or secondary? Is the shape of a rose a primary quality or a secondary quality? Primary. Why? Because atoms have shape, right? Yes.
Why wouldn't color be the primary?
No, primary is secondary quality. Primary for this distinction, it's just the corpuscularians that make this distinction between primary and secondary, right? And color is produced by the arrangement and motion of the atoms, of the molecules, right? There's no color. There's no color in the world. Color only exists in us. There's animals that don't see color. That's why, did I do the red balloon at the beginning of this course? Yeah. And it's just the stupidest example she could ever use because we all do see different colors. I told you about my granddaughter said to me, Grandma Jimmy, how come you got a pink bedspread? It's not pink, it's orange. No, I think it's pink. Some people tried to say to me, they said, well, it's salmon, but it looked orange to me, We all see different colors, and other creatures have different eyes. They see different colors, right? This is one of the things that sort of confirms this a little bit. Really confirms this position over here. If different creatures are experiencing a different world, why is that? Because they bring different stuff to their experience, right? Now animals just bring their God-given hardware, and they bring whatever God has equipped them with to perceive the world, right? But human beings, in addition to whatever God-given hardware we also have culture, history, and language communities. And that's what makes our freedom so enormous, because we don't have to buy into, and that's what education really gives you. Without an education, you think the world as you perceive it is the way the world really is. And those other people are just stupid because they're seeing a different world, No, they have different conceptual concepts that they're perceiving the world through. I have a book that I'm just starting. I have a book coming out September 1st, but I'm already started on this new book. And it's about levels of intelligence or levels of consciousness. And there are different levels of consciousness. ISIS is a real primitive level of consciousness. and who they think God is, you know? That's a real primitive level of consciousness, but that's how they're seeing the world. Other people have higher levels of consciousness. We're not all operating out of the same mind, you know? Anyway. So, the shape of a rose. How about the motion of a rose blowing in the wind? Primary, why? Motion. All you got to do is know the primary qualities. Motion, extension, shape, number, and motion and rest, right? So the primary qualities, motion, shape. How about the smell of that rose? Secondary. Yes. Yeah, primary qualities are the qualities that make up the atom. The way this came about was they started to see that there was a difference between, you know, if I put my hand in a fire, I experience pain. And I get a sensation. If I feel this desk, I get a sensation. Or I look at this thing and I get the sensation of a shape. Okay, but this thing has a shape and that fire has pain. They're really different, right? You don't want to say that pain is a characteristic of that fire, right? But you do want to say that shape is a characteristic of that tree. Come up with a theory that will explain that. That's all of science goes about it in that way. You know, we thought the sun went around the earth. Why? Well, you see it go around the earth. No, you don't. It's what you imagine. You perceive it that way. Because you think, well, the earth is a lot bigger than the sun, and the earth isn't moving, the sun's moving. And we believed that for the longest time until Copernicus came along and said, no, it's just the opposite. The earth is going around the sun. And with that, we were able to explain all sorts of things. And that explanation is what we go with. And then 500 years later, we find out, you know what, there's an even better explanation. What amazes me about the arrogance of human beings is whenever we come up with a new theory, we think that's the way that God really, now we know how God really did it, you know? Until 100 years later, we go, okay, that's wrong. But now we really, you know, right now we know that Einstein's theories are wrong. We just don't have anything to replace them with yet. But we know that this is wrong. Astrophysicists are saying only about 40% of the universe is made up of atoms in the void. The rest is dark energy, dark light. What's that all? We don't even have a theory for it yet, you know? A part of string theory is saying that the whole universe is actually a palindrome? No, palogram, a hologram, right? It's just a projection. I got all these words in my head. It's very close to what Berkeley said, right? How about the number of petals on the rose? How about the color of the rose? Good. The smell of the rose. Did I do that? Good. That's it on appearance and reality. The kinds problem. The kinds problem is this. We have ideas in our head. Most of the ideas are ideas we have of individual things. They come through experience. There's nothing, we can discuss that, but there's other ideas that we have that aren't ideas of particular things. They're ideas of kinds of things. All of language, with the exception of pronouns and personal nouns, are about kinds of things. Horse doesn't refer to a thing, it refers to a concept, right? It's not just that horse or that horse or that, it's all horses. Okay, where do these concepts exist? Because they don't exist in the real world. We don't see them anyplace out there. All we see are individuals, right? So how do we get these concepts? Plato, and two questions. Where do they exist and how do we know them? Plato says, where do they exist? In another world. Very good. How do we know them? Well, in the Meno, and there's several questions on the Meno here, he explains that we know them through recollection. That we had seen the other world before we were born, and then we forgot. When we came into this life, we forgot. But learning is really a matter of recollection. The older Plato, the late Plato, doesn't really believe that, but it's a myth that he has to get going to support the idea of when he presents in the Meno, when he presents that to Meno, and he does the slave boy, and he gets the slave boy to explain the Pythagorean theorem, although he has no knowledge of geometry, Meno's impressed. Meno goes, wow, you just proved that the soul's immortal. And Socrates says, well, I don't know if I'd fight over that, or I don't know if I'd swear an oath to that. But what I will swear an oath to is we'll be better and braver men if we pursue learning, right? Aristotle would say, well, no, Plato, you're wrong. They don't exist in the other world. They exist in our head. How do we know them? Well, we have an active intellect. God, or certainly Thomas Aquinas would say God, has equipped us with an active intellect. We also have a passive intellect. And our passive intellect just receives data. Just all the sensations come in. But I also have an active intellect that goes, hey, you guys, you have the same form, Example, the person sitting next to you, are they the same as you or different from you? Philosophy, so the answer is both. And the way Aristotle explains it is you're made up of form and matter. And just like everybody else, he never explains to what matter is. But you both have the human form, but you have varying degrees of matter, I have more matter here, less matter up here. And that's what makes me different from you. But I share the same form. And Aristotle claims we have an active intellect that can actually pick out the forms. And we just have this natural God-given ability to go, oh, that's a tree, and that's a tree, and that's a tree. How'd you know? And that's a bush, and that's a tree, and that's a tree, and that's a tree. That's a shrub, And how'd you do that? I don't know. I just have this natural ability. Well, now we know that it's not a natural ability. You were taught how to do that. Bug, doesn't mean you hit the wall. And you learn how to put things together, right? With my grandkids, I've seen, I don't spend a lot of time with them because I just don't like kids. But I'm sorry. It was kind of cool when they were younger. They would say things to me, and you could just see they were trying to figure things out. My grandson said to me one time, Poppy, what are you, like 40? I said, your mother's 40. Or one time I said, how do you know Christine and Sammy? They're their cousins, Well, they're my grandkids too. How does that happen? They're just so amazed by it because they don't know how anything works. And eventually they figure it out and they think they know. You really don't know. It's very tricky. Locke comes along and says, well, Aristotle, you're right. There are, they are in the head, but we don't have an active intellect. We just make judgments. And we go, I think that's a mammal, and that's a mammal, and that's a mammal. Somebody's trying to tell me the other day, no, there really are mammals. No, there's not. They made it up 200 years ago. Prior to 200 years ago, the book of Genesis says whales are fish. Fish are things that live in the ocean. A bat is a bird. It flies in the air. A human being is a land animal. They live on the land. No, they're all mammals. Really? What's a mammal? Well, it has mammary glands. It bears forth its young alive. It has hair and lungs. And bats have that, and whales have that, and human beings have that. You could have used anything. You could have used fingernails. Now, there is a reason that they do that in order to hook it up with evolution. But it's a convention. It's just a way to divide up the world, right? Is that the way God divided up the world? And the answer is, how would we know? I think that's why the gospel is so important, because Jesus at least gives us certain kinds. Sin, faith, couple of other things too. This book that I have coming out September 1st, this is going to get me burned at the stake so bad. I said it's called Jesus' Copernican Revolution because I argue that if you listen to what Jesus is saying, just take his words. He's coming out against religion, against family, against wealth, against justice. He never says anything good about those four things. He's blowing the world apart, and we just can't handle it. We just go, no. Okay, we believe Copernicus, but we're not going to take this Jesus stuff. That's just too radical. Jesus doesn't really mean, unless you hate your mother and father and brothers and sisters, you can't be my disciples. That's what he says. Show me one good thing he says about family. Show me one good thing he says about religion. Somehow we made him into a religion. And what he's trying to show is, look, what he's really against, and at the end of the book I make the case that it's not really religion that he's against, it's righteous religions. There's really only two religions in the world. And it's not Muslim or Jewish or Christian. There's religions that move toward righteousness, and there's religions that move towards mercy. And that's the real distinction. And Jesus is talking about a religion that is always based upon mercy and not righteousness. He never tells anybody that they're righteous. He tells people that they have great faith, but not that they're righteous. Anyway, I'm starting to preach. Back to this. We got to finish this. So Locke thinks, yeah, they're in our head, but we form them out of judgments. Past generations made these judgments about how to put things together, and they just pass it on to us through education. Wittgenstein says, well, Plato made a mistake 2,000 years ago, and we've been making the same mistake ever since. There are no essences. There are no eidos. There are no forms. You don't need that for language. The way language really works is not with forms, but, anybody remember? Right, very good. Family resemblance. We just see family resemblances in things, and we recognize that, and we put things together. A family, anybody here have 6, 7 siblings? And they're all out of the same mother and father? And is a family resemblance. It's not one characteristic, it's not one essence. You know, you all have your father's left ear or something, you know. There's a whole bunch of different characteristics, and they pop up and disappear. But he says this whole question of kinds is kind of screwed up because we've supposed all this time that there's some essence that we get to group things together and to make them into kinds. Anyway, so that's the overview. Let me give you questions. Oh, let's go to the actual section on the kinds. Matching. Plato, Aristotle, Wittgenstein, and Locke. How about this? Most people claim that this philosopher claimed that we knew universals or kinds, the eidos, through a process of recollection. Plato, very good. Kinds or universals have an actual existence in another world. That is a world of ideas apart from the world of appearance. Plato, very good. Nominal essences. Who believed in nominal essences? Locke, very good. I wrote my dissertation on that, arguing that Locke also talks about real essences. Remember, he's a corpuscularian, and he said that, okay, now we have to use nominal essences. We just make judgments and put things together. But when we get microscopes that are good enough to go to the atomic level and actually see the corpuscles, then we'll organize things according to their real essences. And my dissertation was an argument that said, that's never going to happen, because if you don't have an active intellect on the level of everyday experience, you're not going to have an active intellect on the microscopic level either. You're going to have to make judgments, yeah? Anybody remember in high school in biology when you looked through the microscope the first time at an amoeba or something? What did you see? If you're like me, you didn't see anything until the teacher told you what you were supposed to see. And then you see it. Yeah, but you're being told what you're supposed to see. You know? Is that what's really there? I don't know. I use the example all the time. You're the first doctor that does an autopsy. You cut open a human being. What do you see? Stuff. Stuff. It's just stuff. Make up a story. Oh, they don't make up a story. Yeah, they do. They just make up a story about it. And if somebody comes along later and has a better story, you go, oh, that's really good, you know? But it's all a likely story, you know? How about an active intellect? Which one of these 4 guys believed in an active intellect? Aristotle, very good. And there's no such thing as universals or essences. We really use family resemblances. Wittgenstein, right, very good. Yeah, in German, he's Austrian, you know, the W is pronounced like a V, you know, Wittgenstein. I used to hang out with these 2 Austrian doctors, and it's back when they had jukeboxes, you know, and they say, go play V3 in the jukebox, you know, so I play V3, they go, what the hell is that? They just It's V3. No, V3. This B, you know? That V3. Anyway. I'm looking for twos. Oh, there's a lot of questions too with this 2 section on Plato. We did the Meno, or we went through a little bit of the Meno. So if I said, what did Socrates think is the ethos of beauty?